10 Greatest Sports Rivalries. Number 10. Green Bay Packers vs. Chicago Bears. Since 1921, the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears have played each other about 200 times. No NFL team has won more championships and none has placed more players in the Hall of Fame than the Packers and the Bears. Apart from longevity and legends, this is a rivalry about geography. The relative proximity of the Midwest's main megalopolis to the NFL's smallest hometown, between which those from the Windy City to their way to vacations on Wisconsin lakes. Number 9. Los Angeles Lakers vs. Boston Celtics. The Los Angeles Lakers and the Boston Celtics have met 12 times in the NBA Finals, and the rivalry between the two is fierce. There is simply no better personal rivalry than Magic Johnson vs. Larry Bird or Bill Russell vs. Will Chamberlain. The rivalry is also very complex, and race is part of the story. In the 1980s, when Johnson and Bird were dueling, the Celtics fielded a disproportionately white lineup at a time when the game had become dominated by African American players. Yet, 2 decades earlier, the Celtics had a starting lineup that featured at least 4 black players in an era when that was far from the norm. Number 8. Joe Fraizer vs. Muhammad Ali. Race was also central to this great rivalry, even though both men were African American. Privately, the two had been friends before their first match in 1971, but that changed. Ali was both an outspoken champion of black power and a master of gaining psychological advantage. So, he went to great lengths to depict Fraizer, who was largely silent on the issue of civil rights, as a patsy for the white establishment. In the first fight, Fraizer retained the heavyweight championship with a decision over the previously undefeated Ali. In their 1973 rematch, Ali won a commanding decision over Fraizer, who had earlier lost the title to George Foreman. The last Ali-Fraizer fight for the championship, after Ali beat Foreman for the title, was fought in 1975 in the Philippines and is considered by many to be the greatest fight of all time. For 14 rounds, Ali and Fraizer beat the hell out of each other. Ultimately, Ali survived better than Fraizer and won the three-line Manila fight by a technical knockout. Number 7. Boston Red Sox vs. New York Yankees. When it comes to Major League Baseball, it doesn't get any better than the New York Yankees-Boston Red Sox rivalry. In 1920, the Red Sox sold Babe Ruth, then best known as an overpowering pitcher, to the Yankees. Ruth went on to become the Bambino. Meanwhile, the Red Sox, bearing the burden of that ill-fated transaction, the curse of the Bambino, didn't win a World Series since then. It was only in 2004 that the Red Sox managed to win titles again, and since then, and including 2004, have won 4 more championships. Number 6. Ohio State vs. Michigan. Moving on to American football, maybe the biggest rivalry is between Michigan and Ohio State. In 1835 to 1836, troops from Ohio and Michigan actually scrimmaged in a border dispute that became known as the Toledo War. Beginning in 1897, the Michigan Wolverines and the Ohio State Buckeyes renewed this border battle annually since 1918. The 1960s and 1970s were the rivalry's classic era, when coaching legends Bo Schembelcher and Woody Hayes guided Michigan and Ohio State. Number 5. Duke vs. North Carolina. Their 2 famous home courts, Cameron Indoor Stadium and the Dean Smith Center, are but a short drive from each other down Tobacco Road in North Carolina. This neighborhood tug of war became a national obsession because both teams are always so ridiculously good. Every Final Four, from 1988 to 2001 except one, included Duke or the University of North Carolina. In every NCAA tournament since 2004 except one, either the Blue Devils or the Tar Heels had been a number 1 or number 2 seed. Number 4. Chris Evert vs Martina Navratilova. From 1973 to 1988, the two played each other 80 times, advantage Navratilova 43 to 37, as they lifted the women's game to prominence on their skillful shoulders. They had met in 14 Grand Slam finals, with Navratilova winning 10. Navratilova had a temper, Evert stayed cool the entire time. Evert thrived on clay, Navratilova flourished on grass. Navratilova was the master of serve and volley, Evert rode the baseline. They were the perfect pairing of opposites. Number 3. Arnold Palmer vs Jack Nicklaus. Throughout the 1960s, the two dominated men's professional golf and in the process built deep lasting friendship. A decade or so older than Nicklaus, Palmer burst on the scene in the 1950s, and by the end of the decade he was the game's best player, but only until Nicklaus came along. In the early 1960s, the pair engaged in a series of hard-fought battles in major championships, but by the mid-1960s, Palmer's game was beginning to fade, while the Golden Bear just got better and better. In the end, Nicklaus would be revered by many as the greatest player in golf history, or Tiger Woods. Palmer had to settle for being the game's most popular player and having a drink named after him. Number 2. Canada vs Russia. Most Canadians of a certain age can tell you where they were on a specific day in 1972. When they heard that Paul Henderson had scored the goal that gave the Canadian national hockey team a victory over the Soviet Union in the landmark Summit Series. The rivalry born of that series continues to be played out of the rinks, the Olympics, World Championships, and Junior Championships, but it dates from this pivotal moment when the two countries met for the first time. Never before had Canadian professional players from the National Hockey League taken the ice against the powerful Soviet team that was amateur in name only. Team Canada thought they would easily roll over the Soviets, but the Red Machine took a 3-1-1 lead in the series. Only by winning the final 3 games in Moscow were the Canadians able to triumph 4-3-1. Number 1. New Zealand All Blacks vs South Africa Springboks. With few exceptions, year in and year out, South Africa and New Zealand have dominated international rugby. In 1981, local outrage at South Africa's apartheid policy led to widespread protests and street battles with police. South Africa was prohibited from competing in the first World Cup competitions in 1987 and 1991. In 1995, apartheid was history and black activist Nelson Mandela was the president of South Africa when it returned to the World Cup. South Africa won by beating New Zealand in the championship game. This story is also told in the movie Invictus. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed our video, please like it, subscribe to our channel, and let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Stay tuned for more entertaining videos and trivia facts you've probably never thought of here on Sportastic channel. Have a great day.